And we're back again. Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome at the team session, Connected Healthcare. Welcome at Create Tomorrow. Joined today, I'm joined by a very special panel. But before we dive into why are these panelists here, what is Connected Healthcare, what are the boundaries, we're going to look at a short movie. Lisette van Stijnvoorde, a pressured colleague at the UT, close enough company, will give the introduction. Take it away.
I'm pleased to welcome you today at the Create Tomorrow event on the connected health topic. And especially because today is an historical day. Today it's the first day that we have to comply to the medical device regulation. We went from a directive, the medical device directive, to a regulation, a law. If you want to create a medical device and you want to put it on the market in Europe, you have to comply to the CE regulation. And from products with a CE mark, we know that they are created, developed, tested, and followed according to the same regulations and guidance as counting within Europe. From 1993 until yesterday, medical devices had to comply to the Medical Device Directive. And from today on, you have to comply to the Medical Device Regulation. So we switch from a directive of 60 pages to a law of 175 pages. The reason for the shift from a directive to a regulation is multiple. First of all, the document out of 1993 was outdated. There was no room for things like medical device apps, 3D printed parts, monitoring at home, and all kinds of innovations. And furthermore, also some scandals in the media showed the urge of improvement within the regulation. You can think of the PIP scandal on breast implants, or for example the implant files, which were recently in the news. If we compare the Medical Device Directive to the Medical Device Regulation, we see that there is much more focus on clinical evaluation and technical data. And there are more requirements to put your medical device on the market. With the upcoming short video, I would like to show the importance of a good medical device development from a patient perspective. I would like to show you a short video about Suze. And Suze is suffering from epileptic attacks. And she received a nervous vagus stimulator in order to suppress these attacks. The video is in Dutch, however, it's not so important that you understand the text literally, it is only important that you listen to the voice of Suze. So, let's watch the video.
32-jarige Suze heeft al jaren last van epileptische aanvallen. Om die aanvallen te verminderen wordt dit apparaatje in haar borst geïmplanteerd. Maar als het eenmaal in haar lichaam zit, komt ze van de regen in de drup.
Waar ik last van heb, zijn bijvoorbeeld het dichtknijpen van het gebeurt de stemband. Nu, hè? Het wordt nu actief. Ik moet nu erg veel kracht gebruiken, waarbij mijn buik strak samen moet spannen om genoeg...
en nu wordt je stem weer normaal.
Ja, hij is nu weer uitgeslagen.
So, we've seen that the nervous vagus stimulator of Suze is working. Her epileptic attacks are suppressed. However, every time when the device is active, we see that she cannot use her voice properly. And for now, I don't want to dive into details of this specific case, but I would like to use it as an example to ask ourselves questions like, is this a defective device? And if it is a defective device, is it then an incident or is it a production fault? Or is this an expected residual risk? And was it seen already during clinical trials? But was in the risk-benefit analysis decided that the benefit of suppressing an epileptic attack was weighing higher than the risk or the drawback of not using your voice properly? And if this decision was made, who was then involved? And which users were there? And in the case of Suze, now she has this issue with this nervous vagus stimulator. How can she find out who is the legal manufacturer and how can she contact this legal manufacturer? What should she do? So all these questions are essential to answer during good medical device development, and they're all related to mandatory activities like determining the intended use, setting up usability engineering, and clinical trials. So today is a very historical day for medical device developers in Europe, because today we have to comply to this medical device regulation. And this is a huge challenge for medical device developers all over Europe, but I think it's also an opportunity. And especially it will be an opportunity for people like you who are at the beginning of developing a new medical device, because you can do it right from the beginning on. And that's why I would like to state that every medical device developer should start with setting up a good quality management system in order to develop a medical device according to the accountable regulations and taking into account all these essential items that we've seen in the video today. Good luck and thank you for your attention.
Wow, well, thank you, Lisette van Stijn, for the Competence Lead Health at Holland Innovative for this introduction and a thorough statement to add. Well, joined here today is my panel, and my panel is comprised of, first of all, Jan-Gerard Maring, Director, Connected Healthcare and Hospital Pharmacist at the Itzala Hospital.
Yes.
Joined by me is Henk Westendorp, Senior Director of Medtronic, and on the other side, Corné van Waterburg, Director at Reuma, the Netherlands. And welcome, of course, the public, because you play an important role today. You can ask questions. You can ask questions in the chat, and we can answer your questions. So to start, Jan-Gerard, there's actually a very important part that has to do with clinical evaluation. And from a hospital side, that must trigger you.
Yes, and also as a hospital pharmacist. And it's very interesting to hear about this development in medical devices, that we, in the development of medicines, you see that we learned a lot. From 1600 we have the pharmacopoeias, and since the 60s we have the clinical phase development from phase 1 in a little group of people that are healthy volunteers, until phase 2, 3 and 4 until you're on the market. And it's very interesting to see that I think we can learn in the medical device development from what we have introduced years and years ago for medicines. But that's my first reflection on this movie. And from the perspective of the use of medical devices and in connected healthcare in our hospital, in the Isla Hospital in Zwolle, we are more and more using remote monitoring, remote sensing devices. And what we see at this moment is really that we also have to learn how to implement this in a real life situation in the hospital. And well, that's pretty new for us, at least the volume of remote sensing and monitoring that's coming the next years.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit more on that later. Henk, for you as a company, this also must trigger a lot of attention and maybe urge. How do you see it?
Well, when you look at the MDR, I think there's quite some companies. One of the reasons actually this was set up, initiated, was because many companies were actually ahead of the game over the MDR. So our own quality control metrics, procedures were already in place that were more rigid than than, for example, getting the CE mark. CE mark is typical for safety, not so much efficacy. Now, in order for you to get safety, you need fewer patients. Trials are much smaller. But in order for you to get the adoption of a technology or a therapy that was shown in the video, you actually require larger trials. Now, I have to say there's always a balance, and building upon what you said is regarding learning from the pharmaceuticals is absolutely true. I think there's more and more requirement, not just about getting the product in the hands of the physicians, but also what do you do afterwards? Meaning, how will you measure actually the effects of certain devices or therapies over time? Yep. So you see these post-market registries coming up now that are very important, and that's what you have to learn from, and then bring that back in your own R&D organization to see, hey, the product is on the market, but we see that there are certain side effects, or the population is maybe not properly defined. we have to go back to the engineering table or working with the physicians to see how can we make sure we can continue to improve ourselves.
And that's, I think, a great bridge to you, Corné, because you must be thrilled that we have a new set of regulation that will hopefully improve quality for the patient.
Yeah, thank you, Wanda. The perspective of the patient of the Netherlands is that new developments should be done together with patients. So when there is the regulations are more and more upfront, then we can develop together with industry and with hospitals more safe and more efficacy solutions. So yes, with the MDR for therapeutic solutions and for technical devices, yeah, that's a big step forward for our patient groups.
So ideally, we would have to put you three into a research product, and then everything will be fine, and we comply to the rules, and the patient is happy, and the hospital can do their work, or am I mistaken?
Actually, it happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so, yeah, working together.
And I think that those are the best solutions, actually, if you bring the different disciplines together. So I'm an engineer. I studied actually here mechanical engineering, and the most successful products or solutions we've developed was always in close collaboration with physicians, hospital settings, as well as with patients involved. Now, the thing is, though, there are certain technologies that go so fast right now when it comes to connectivity, data, apps. And the question is, okay, how do you make sure that actually, even if you bring these people together, that there's enough room to actually, I wouldn't call it experiment, but to test your solution in a certain environment. And that's something that I think is still where the governments and the regulatory bodies actually could also facilitate to create such an environment.
Okay, and I hear you say that it already happens, and we already do it, and it maybe is the best way forward. But on the other hand, in your last sentence, you say, well, maybe we should facilitate it a bit more, and maybe we should push it a bit more, because the benefit is so large that it should be, well, maybe obligatory? How do you say that, Gerard?
Yes, well, I very much agree on that we should take the perspective from the patient as key. It starts with the perspective of the patient. And especially, with more complex medical devices, such as the products from Medtronic, I think this is going very well. But the issue is, I think, about newer app-like developments that only have a CE mark so far and are implemented, but sometimes there are decisions made based on algorithms, and you can ask, well, what's the effect on outcome, on healthcare? And I think we should think about the phase 2 clinical trial that we know from the pharmaceuticals, so that we look at the standard of care and the newer method with an app, that we test it in the hospital and or multi-center in more hospitals, and that should be the access with the registration to the market. I think that's the development that we should make, also on apps with an algorithm in it.
Yeah, but on the other hand, those apps make the life of patients pretty easy, and well, yes, we've seen a lot of them already. I mean, if you go to the App Store, I think you can find more health apps than you could think of. Are you saying that
if it's an informative app, or is it giving a direction into use more medicines, or do this or do that? And if it trains you in things to do that has an effect on your health, then we must think about, well, preventing from what we saw in the video.
But Corné, I think that, well, looking from your perspective, a patient is thrilled that he can just use an app and doesn't have to go to a doctor anymore, and he doesn't mind if the app says, well, take your medicines, or the doctor says, take your medicines.
I think the patient perspective up till now is going to the doctors is the best step forward.
Yeah.
Secondly, people like the apps to be informed. And yes, that there is a monitoring, and that's the best step forward, I think, on third side, that there is a connection between the doctor and the patient in real world situations. So when he has his app and the app says you need to take some more medicines, but that's also advised and monitored by his doctor, then this is a step forward for our patients groups. And now at the moment people are going, and we see it in this COVID period, they want to go to their doctor what he says and what he sees. And that's very, very necessary to understand.
Can I respond to this?
Yes,
Because
please.
I think how I see at least one of the main challenges for healthcare today, but also for the future, is the lack of resources.
Yes.
Not just money, but people. COVID made it very clear. I'm not talking about just ICU capacity, but also nurses, staff, physicians. With the great tsunami that's coming, we all know capacity is key and resources will be key. Yeah. So one of the areas that we are working on, but also other companies, is, for example, building an artificial based physician, right? So in the end, the patient can interact with his or her physician, first and foremost, in an interactive way. It's not a real physician, it's actually an algorithm. The question now is this a real physician? Is there a backup of a real physician? Where is it based upon? Is it a medical device, or is it more a lifestyle coach? So what you see is actually where does the medical device start and where does it become more lifestyle? Especially in those new areas like AI, apps, you'll get the resources and support for patients is going to change. The interaction is going to change.
Last year was published, I think it was in the Lancet, that the artificial intelligence doctor was at least as good as a real physician. So we're getting on a level nowadays that it's on the level of a normal doctor, but I think within a few years it's better. But we have to validate it, and that's key, I think. The validation of this artificial intelligence, and then it's no problem. Maybe we all want an artificial intelligence doctor that knows everything what's on my disease in the world, standard, the latest developments included. And there is no human that knows the latest development in his brain. That's impossible. So it's also, well, I think it's a very interesting development, and I believe we will, in 10 years, this is standard.
Yeah, so COVID showed us indeed the problems and demonstrated our vulnerability in our system, resource-wise. We also want the solution, we want the technology, and the technology is helping us as a solution, as an AI doctor. But on the other hand, we say, well, the regulation, does it hinder us when developing it, or does it facilitate us developing those solutions?
A real doctor is 12 years in college and then gets his registration. Yeah. So an artificial doctor, AI doctor, also has to prove that the system is capable of doing the right thing, isn't it? Yeah. So it isn't bad, I think, that we have these regulations.
So you don't mind that we have to do all those phases and then hopefully after 12 or 15 years we have a good solution?
Yeah, you need to have the regulations because you cannot afford take what happens right now over the last 12 months with the COVID pandemic. Thanks to the focus of many clever scientists and the regulatory bodies, we're able to get the vaccine out there in a very short time. Yeah. However, the big question everybody asks, is it safe, right? Yeah. And you want to make sure you have that regulatory body and everything in line. The question is more, even if you comply, you're not there yet. Yeah. That's one thing. And the other thing is it sufficient to get, for example, those new technologies that are coming towards us? AI is one piece, robotics is another area. And that's where I wonder if as soon as you put the MDR out there, it's more or less already outdated. So the innovation you bring with technologies, and I'm speaking on my behalf, the MDR needs to basically float with it, right? Yeah. Don't wait another 10 years, but keep it in balance with the industry and the clinicians and the patient groups
Well, you showed a good example because, well, we all seen it in the COVID period that, well, the healthcare professionals and the people working in healthcare actually drove the innovation. They were needing to be creative because of the immense pressure that was on the system. But I'm wondering, how do the people at home see this? And let's ask them whether people working in healthcare should be offered more room and space for it. So I invite the crowd that's watching to go to menti.com, so www.menti.com, and use the code 18670791. You can see it also in your screen, so go to menti.com and use the code 18670791. And let's see if they agree with us, because I have a statement prepared, which is, people working in healthcare are the best source for innovations and should be given the space and the time to work on this innovation. And I'm curious what the audience will say. Let's give them another chance to log in. So go to www.menti.com, use the code 18670791, and see whether they agree or disagree with the statement. Let's give them a second. Oh, here we go. It's still 50-50. We see, oh, well, no. It's slowly shifting. People are more agreeing on it than disagreeing on it. So if it was up to the people that are watching, we should say to our government, give those doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals time and money or resources to invest on it. Give them space because they know how to bring innovations to the market when it's needed. How do you see that, Corné?
In this statement, I'm missing the patient groups.
You're missing the patient group.
I think the best should be working together, doctors, patients, and people with knowledge about new developments. Innovation managers, mechanical engineers, so not only doctors, because they are working only focused on their own situation, on their own problem. And working together, I think that should be the best.
That should be the best.
That's my opinion from a patient perspective.
Yeah. But from a hospital perspective, do we even have time and resources to do this?
We create some time, but first of all, I want to comment on this.
Yes, please.
Because I think, yes, patients and people working in healthcare are maybe the best source of getting the questions right in what we need, but not in working out the innovations. I think people from tech can think out of the box and make little solutions and maybe 5 or 6 little solutions that you can test, and that's not happening in the hospital. So I very much believe in co-creation, and I think we're talking now together with Twente to create a field lab in our hospital in Zwolle, and if we can create a little copy of our hospital, the digital copy, and there we can experiment. I think that would be very interesting, and we can ask doctors to come into our mini hospital and we can test new solutions, and that can be an interesting co-creation, and we can comment together with patients on new developments. Does it work, does it not work? But in fact, the really new inventions, no, we are not trained to think in new techniques, I think. It's the power of the academic and of the industry to think out of the box. That's my personal opinion on this question.
That definitely answers the question, and yeah? I think that also goes to your question that you raised, Henk, when you say, well, it's not only about developing, it's then also about adoption and getting it out there. And do you think that well, by doing this, giving the healthcare professional time and space, well, to experiment, as Jan Gerard is suggesting, do you think then adoption and implementation would benefit?
Yeah, and I would almost, for me, there's a link between the two. I think the first, so let me be very, very clear. The company I work for has 90,000 people. $2 billion goes into R&D. There's no good product getting into the market without clinician support. The ideas happen, on a napkin, literally during a lunch, because the doctor met this patient in the morning, like we saw an example. He expresses the complaint. The engineer goes back to the office and start, jiggling around with the idea. And actually, the company I worked for started in a garage, like many of the startups also here in Enschede and others. And the field labs are key. But building one product versus building 100,000 for Europe or the world is a big difference. And this is where statement number 2 comes in. So even if you have a good idea that you worked out with the physician based on the patient needs, getting it into the market and getting the adoption across like 10,000 hospitals in Europe is the next step. And you can only do that if you can prove that it's actually safe, that it has a good long-term impact, etc. And that's where regulations come in. But it's just more a matter of how can you apply them, and can you apply them in such a fashion that your timeline, a typical R&D timeline, 60% of the time is building and testing, right? The initial part is actually relatively short. And that's where the regulations sometimes take another year or two before you actually get the feedback and get the support and the approvals.
We very much work with innovation funnels now. We introduced the 6, 7, maybe sometimes it's 8 steps, but very in the upper part of the funnel you have a lot of prototyping, and you don't need these regulations, I think. What you need is a very good environment in which you document very good what you did in the prototyping. Then you get it phase 3, phase 4, and then you want to scale up, and then it's the regulation that comes into action, I think. And then it's relevant.
Well, and what you should not forget is there should be another piece to the story, and that is getting paid for your therapy. So especially even if in the morning you worked out a great idea with a physician based on a patient need, in the afternoon you build it, and in the evening you have to get it to the market. You need to get paid for the product. The hospital needs to be able to get reimbursed for the product. In order for you to get the reimbursement, you need to demonstrate the effect of it, and that has to go through a certain protocol. Otherwise, the idea sits on the shelf, and that would be unfortunate.
And Corné, from your perspective, do you think that well, a lot of the things that are on the shelf or are coming could be, well, get into the patient's life faster if the hospitals, healthcare professionals and the patients will be given more room and maybe with more freedom to experiment, to not have to comply in a prototype phase already to all the rules, but, well, have the environment to well, do some experiments?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of ideas on the shelves, but that they come faster to the market when they give them more freedom or more space or more time, I don't think so. The reimbursement, the payments of the government, Zorginstituut, for example, in the Netherlands, or the NZA, takes a lot of time. So I don't think that we bring faster products or new ideas to the market by more freedom. I think that we need to think together, also with these governmental institutions, which development needs some support and needs some more activation. And then I think it can go faster. Now there are a lot of ideas, I think, and the folks on the other side knows much more better. But we need to think together to come to the market and to bring ideas to new life. So not only more freedom for professionals.
Good.
That's my opinion, what I see now with new developments, because there are a couple of new developments for rheumatology patients now on the barrier for the market. And the governmental institutions said, yeah, cost effectiveness, efficacy, safety. And we are waiting, and we need to do a lot of studies in the 3 or 4 years cost effectiveness studies. So we have to rethink also this part of the process.
Yeah. So it's not
And
only about
maybe we have in an early phase, we have to think about what do we introduce and what do we stop.
Right.
Because the government is very frightened, and the insurance companies, it's also add on, and we introduce remote sensing and monitoring. But okay, what does it do for the patient? Is it really value-based healthcare what we're doing, or and that's a key question. And we have in early phase, if it's a very fantastic product, we have to make protocols as a nation and tell the doctors, okay, this is the new standard, but the old work is done. We're doing the new way.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question about what we de-implement if we implement new
we have to
technologies.
de-implement the old-fashioned way of working. Yeah.
Well,
And that's hard.
let's de-implement the old-fashioned way. I was told that Manon has a question, so maybe let's switch to Manon and hear what the questions are.
Yes, we have a question over here. How do we cope with the older generation and their adoption of the new healthcare technologies?
That is a lovely question. Thank you, Manon. Yeah, the older generation, and I can say, luckily, I'm not one of them, but that's not to disregard your ages. So what about the old generation? How will we take them along in these new developments, the AI doctor?
I think, in my experience, bringing technologies to the market, I think I rather not put an age on it. I rather call it early adopters or late, followers. Yeah. But in the end, what I do see in the newer generation, though, is the willingness to have more integrated care practices. So you put the patient central. I think in the past, most of the hospitals were set up like different departments, and most of the physicians' aim was actually to publish as much as possible. I'm generalizing here. I think that you see now a change also in how the education is done, that the patient is put more central, placed more central around care pathways, and then actually different disciplines, especially with patients with comorbidities, diabetes, chronic care, right? Heart failure, hypertension. They need to be seen by different physicians. And what I see at least is that the new generation adopts that type of setting more, and also the use of data and the understanding of processes and protocols. But again, it also depends a little bit on the attitude, of course, of the people. There is a certain healthy conservatism sometimes also necessary, I have to say, because if you jump on the new thing every day, it can also be a bit of a challenge.
I don't think so. It's based on age. Older people are doing a lot on Facebook or something like that. I think the biggest problem is the people who don't have the money to buy a device themselves for self-monitoring or apps or something like that. Mm-hmm. So that's a bigger problem. And literacy, people who can't read on the right way, all these difficult things. So it's not based on age, but more on having the economical surroundings to buy such solutions and the literacy part. You can read all this stuff of the artificial doctor. I think that is the bigger problem, and that's also with younger people and older people. So the adoption is not based on age.
Well, if talking to you, Jan Gerard, when I was in the development phase, or at least in R&D of research project, one thing that always struck me was the conservatism in a hospital for new technology. Do you recognize that, or do you see that's from the past ages?
It's changed. It's from a perspective of patients or from a perspective of healthcare professionals?
Professionals.
Professionals. Yeah. Well, it's changing rapidly. And there are a lot of doctors. We last year we did the so-called Tour de Connect, and we visited all groups of healthcare professionals in the hospital and asked them about new ideas to bring the hospital to home. And there are a lot of healthcare professionals who want to think and have great ideas. So I think it's really changing. And I think that there is a potential of at least 70–80% of the patients to help them to be connected with the hospital on the digital highway. But there is a small group, and digital literacy is key, I think. There will be a group that's not capable of doing this, well, complicated registries in an app. And so there will still be a hospital, and there's still the possibility to come to the hospital and we help you. And combined with that, what is very interesting is what I learned from an NVZ meeting, that in het Gooi, in the center of the Netherlands, they organized a help desk, and that was a help desk that's for all kind of organizations together. And old people who don't know how to work with an app, they can call the help desk. And I very much believe that can be a part of the solution. And we have to co-create and help the patients, and not doing it only from the hospital, but from all healthcare professionals in the framework around the patient.
Yeah.
That can be a part, and then maybe then we go to 90%. But I think it's very much in a phase of the new technologies. Well, it's quite fun, and a lot of healthcare professionals want to be part of it. So I don't know how many years ago you visited the hospital and and had this experience about the old-fashioned way of working. But what I hear is they hate one whole day communicated with only the Zoom meetings with the patient. It's very, well, I think we know it from our own conferences. It's very tiring. And so it will be, I think, a hybrid construction. So you see a patient, and then you see two with two connected, and then one in real life.
Yeah. So hopefully for all the diabetic and rheumatology patients and all the other chronic diseases, the hybrid form will be the new standard.
We very much believe in the hybrid form of healthcare. Yeah.
Like the new hybrid working is becoming our new standard.
We're not as humans made for only screen working, I think.
Yeah, the iRobot I think will be in the far future, not very soon. So let's go back to the public. Let's see what we have on the statement number 2. We had the statement: the new strict laws and regulation will bring more cost-effective medical technologies to the market. And what we're asking, of course, am I seeing the right question? No, we're not seeing the right question. We're going one back. So can I ask the technicians? Yeah, so the pink one, the one at the bottom. So if you go to the menti.com, you can still see the questions, and we're going to look at the lower statement. The new strict laws and regulation will bring more cost-effectiveness technology to the market. As we heard from Jan Gerard, as we heard from Henk and from Corné, the new law and regulations will inflict more clinical testing, more validation of what we do, but also we'll have to look at, well, can we get it approved by the institutes? Is the hospital getting their reimbursement? Is the company getting paid at the end? And do we have a business model in place? And I see that the public is a little bit divided. We see about 50-50. Some say that yes, it will give more cost effectiveness into the market, but there's also a group that says, well, all those new strict laws and regulations, I'm not sure whether it will help us. So what do you think, Henk?
I would like to believe that that is true. And I think it will help, but I don't think it will be sufficient. I do think, getting to the market, I mentioned it before, we're familiar with a couple of products we put to the market. but still may not be cost effective. I do believe if you think about the Netherlands, where we spend 90 billion, I think, on healthcare every year. If I spend money in a company, I'm being asked, where did you spend it on? What's been the impact?
Yeah.
And it's a bit strange that even if we spend with all of us through our insurance company, which is a perfect system, and with beautiful hospitals like Isala with the innovation lab, nobody's asking you about, okay, so what was the outcome? What was the quality of life of the patient that got this device? Now, hospital actually collects some of that information. There's a challenge of having the right protocols in place, but I would rather see, also from a device company perspective, that there is more and more ask around, want to show us the results. And by the way, you don't just show the results of the impact of the therapy, you compare them, and you actually are being held accountable for it. And that's called, going towards a value-based type of procurement model. And I do believe that with the regulation, you're not there yet. You got to start going one level further by asking the hospitals with physicians and companies to actually collect data around outcome.
And do you think that is for patients also a valid outcome? We want to see the outcomes. Where is our money spending on? Because my life should be increased, or my quality of life should be increased.
Quality of life is number one for patients. So when there are right solutions and we can monitor them, then patients would like to pay direct or indirect for the solutions, I think. But coming back to the statement, more solutions, I think there are coming less solutions to the market. Because when you see as a doctor all these regulations, then you say, oh, let's wait a bit. And we need the doctors and the patients for the first improvements and for the first ideas. No. So I think the regulations, and they told 167 pages.
Yep.
That would be my plea. Don't wait for the New England Journal article with a double-blinded clinical trial, but give room for allowing physicians to apply certain new therapies, but collect information about the impact on the patient, and then through a sort of a benefit sharing or whatever you value based, you basically reward the clinician and the company.
Let's see how that reward could look like, because we got a question from the audience. Manon, can you enlighten us?
Sure, I'm going to try it. How do a healthcare insurance company help to accelerate healthcare innovations, and what changes are necessary to achieve this goal?
That's a good question indeed. Thank you, Manon. We're talking about what the outcome should be and how we can improve it, and that it not has to do with only the innovation its own. It has to be paid, and well, this is exactly the kind of institution that has to do with the money.
Yeah.
I can
comment on that. Yeah. Well, when we started with the Connected Care program 2.5 years ago, we were very much in this discussion with the healthcare insurers about how to get access to the 425 million that was provided from the deal. After a couple of months of talking, we concluded that we had to construct a situation in which we decide together about what we want to do and what we want to experiment and what we want to invest in. And then you have to be very open about how to get the numbers to decide about what to go and what not to go in and what to put the money on. So every 2 weeks we speak together with people from the hospital and people from the insurance company about how are we on track with the Connected Care projects. There are 20 now, and doctors can bring in new ideas, and then we talk about it, and if there is a big discussion, we don't start and we don't fund it. And the interesting thing is, we also started with what are we have the quadruple aim where we rank it on. So what's the impact on outcome? What's the impact on patient experience? What's the impact on costs? And what's the impact on professional? The impact on professional experience. We want to have happy nurses and happy doctors, isn't it? So, and we had to build from our Power BI dashboards, we had to build it from scratch on because this information wasn't available in the hospital. And now, after 2.5 years, we have these dashboards for most of the projects, and now we can follow it. And to be very transparent to the insurance company, that's very important because we can follow the impact of a certain device or a certain intervention on what's it doing on admissions to the hospital, what's it's doing on the use of medicines. But we had to create it from scratch on, and I think if we heard about the insurance, the relation with the insurance company, I think openness is key.
Yeah, but openness to show them a lot of data that they are asking. They still have an important role, I hear, from your point of view. Yeah. And in your previous contribution, you said, well, patients, they don't mind, they want to pay for it directly or indirectly, but, well, I think that we're all Dutch and we like to do it for the least costs as possible. Mm-hmm. So those insurance still pay a lot of, it's playing an important role when it comes to the new innovations.
Yeah, they play. They play a big role in coming interventions or new ideas to the market.
And do we need to change it?
Do we need to change it?
Because Henk said, well, it sort of works.
No, but I think yes, we have. Yeah, we have to change because what we see. And I think from the Isola Klinieken you also know, there are some new ideas. For example, that we bring third line care back to the first line or the zero line. And then the insurance company says, this is third line money and this is first line money, and we don't bring from the third to the first line. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we need also this insurance companies to change their minds. Yeah. And change our minds to bring new solutions to the market.
So for the public at home, the third line, you mean like the really specialized clinical setting?
The doctor in the academical institute.
Yeah, and the first line, you mean the GP, like the house doctor we know in the Netherlands.
Well, we talk going to make an example there?
Yeah, please.
No, because I think the insurance companies definitely play a huge role, and they are partner, as we talked about the different stakeholders. There's innovation budgets and there's nice programs, as you mentioned. If you think about what happened during the COVID situation, we saw more and more patients that get on remote monitoring. So instead of getting the patients into the hospital, you can actually move them and monitor them from home. Yep. But that's not reimbursed properly. So it's actually more attractive for hospitals to get the patients coming into the hospital. So this is where it becomes, there are certain barriers that need to be removed. This is one of them. We saw the same with same-day discharge. There are procedures you can do in one day, so the patient doesn't have to stay over. But it's actually more, it's more attractive for the hospital to keep the patient in the hospital. So that's pacemakers, PCIs, ablations, etc. They are slowly but surely changing that and understanding this. But I believe in the end, they also need to change the model going from, like a DRG per procedure. You have to think about a population. Yeah. So if you take Isola, you look at the population of patients that are that have rheumatic problems or stroke challenges or diabetes or chronic heart failure, empower that healthcare environment where it's you also reinforce the collaboration between the first, the second, and the third line, and say, okay, you are in charge basically to keep the patients out of the hospital, drive prevention, but that would be a total sum you would provide to that institution more or less. Right now, you basically get a fixed budget and you get paid for every procedure.
I
And I
very
think
much agree on this.
that's the beautiful of what Isela is doing and where Reuma Netherlands is also advocating for. But let's see. Let's look at the clock because we have a few minutes left. So I would all three of you invite. Well, what's your last statement? What's your uitsmijter in Dutch? Where do you want to end with? Can I begin with you, Corné?
Yeah, thank you. What's my uitsmijter? My last sentence is, let's think first from the perspective of the patient. And second, let's work together to bring new solutions, new ideas, as quick as possible to the market.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Corné. Jan Gerard.
Yeah, let's co-create. And very much agree on what you in fact your uitsmijter is. We can do this together, and COVID showed it that if you put a lot of people in a room and there is a lot of brilliant thinking together, then you get very fast to a result. And we should that take from what we learned last year and continue that in a maybe at a slower pace, but we let's hold on that and keep on the good work in co-creation and working together.
Yeah. Thank you. Henk, last but not least.
Yeah, mijn uitsmijter. I would build on the co-creation, but I would also say, I know there's engineers, students out there, you got to be innovative while you're building your solution together with physicians and patients going forward, but also be creative around how to handle some of these regulations, how to work with clinical trials. Maybe you should work on modeling, for example, or be creative in multiple ways, and don't stop. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but in the end, if your idea fits with patient needs and you can prove it and you believe in it, then there's so much opportunity in this space, and there's a lot of work to do.
Well, thank you. Well, for now, from a university perspective, I would say I think we shared a lot of knowledge. We discussed the possibilities and maybe also the impossibilities. So thank you, panelists, for being here. Thank you, Henk Westerdorp. Thank you, Jan Gerard Maring. And thank you, Corné van Batenburg. Thank you all at home for watching. First of all, good luck with the challenge and the case that you will be doing tomorrow when it comes to the health domain. Thank you for watching. Also, a big thank you for all the people behind stage, at the backstage, for organizing this and helping us get these sessions on the road. My name was Wanda Kenter. I'm very happy to be your host for this afternoon, and I wish you a very pleasant evening. Thank you and goodbye.